Some of you will already know this because I've already talked about it on Patreon. Back at the end of September, I suddenly lost one of my cats to a super unexpected heart issue. To be honest, it kind of ruined my life, and I really wanted to make a project for him. I would really like to believe that he is now living like one of the cats in a Ghibli film. So I've been wanting to design a Ghibli film set in autumn. Adding him to it just makes it that much more special. In a cookie tin, of course, which is extra fitting because...
No. I'm sorry. I would love to give them to you, but they're not.
Starting by coming up with our concept. There are two main things about him that I wanted to incorporate into this project. First of all, I wanted it to be a dessert shop. Whenever dessert came around, he was ready to try and snatch it from us. I don't know why he was so obsessed with sweets. It was kind of adorable. And he absolutely loved going outside and being in nature, which I thought was very fitting for a Ghibli film. He could totally be a Ghibli character, and the best one at that. The concept that I wanted to do was essentially the back of the dessert shop with a whole garden area. There's not gonna be that much to signify that it's a dessert shop, but that was the concept, so at least you know. Of course, we're starting with the base. Now, structurally, this is very similar to the Spirited Away project, but with like an added deck area. So a lot of how I built the base was pretty similar. I'm just using a lot more wood elements this time, and I'm throwing some popsicle sticks into the mix. Pretty much all the base structures were made from paperboard, cardboard, chipboard, and some popsicle stick elements where it needed to be a little bit more stiff. Essentially the same sliding system. It's just a little bit better done this time. A lot of this was just texturing things, so I did texture the inside floor to look like a tatami mat. You never see it, but it is in there. The whole entire thing was really inspired by traditional Japanese architecture, of course. Again, much inspired by Spirited Away and some of the other Ghibli films. Now, one of the most important elements for me that I wanted to include was this bottom koi pond, to include as much nature as possible. Look at the shadow and tell me it doesn't look like Totoro. The doors are one of the most important parts of this project, pretty similar to the Spirited Away project. I was extremely lucky to get a Dremel for Christmas. Thank you to my family, of course, for that. So I wanted to try doing some wood carving with that. Should I have done more of it before just going in on a project with it? Yes, but I didn't. You'll soon find that that is a trend with me. With this piece, I wanted to focus on the 4 seasons. Wanted it to be a seasonal garden, and then my wonderful kitty is the sort of seasonal spirit, lives in the dessert shop. On the bottom, there will be a small carved wooden area, each door themed with a different season. So for example, for summer, I have the waves, winter, snowy mountain sort of things. For spring, I have a lot of flowers, and for fall, I have, of course, the falling leaves. I really just wanted to add lots of different small elements to add to the story.
So graceful.
Before we put any of this stuff in, I need to paint this back wall. I decided that I wanted to do mango print wallpaper because my cat's name was Mango. A light purple background with some leaves and mangoes. Now, a lot of what I had to paint on this, of course, was wood. So obviously a lot of things got painted brown. Then to weather all of these things, Studson's Destroyed a House Moving Castle video just kept running through my head, or maybe hobbling. So I finally pulled out one of my cheesy makeup brushes to dry brush on some of the texture, which worked very nice. I'm sure you've seen a lot of people do it by now. And of course, we want to paint absolutely everything before sticking it into the tin. Pretty much all the wood I'm using a relatively dark brown base. In a lot of areas I varnish over the top to make the wood look a little bit more shiny. Now, one of the focal point pieces of this whole project were the stained glass designs for the sliding doors. Again, they're going along with the seasonal theme. Drew the designs on paper first, flip it over and use that part where it's bled through to see the mirrored image. To be able to transfer them for the fall, I decided to do a koi fish in a pond with leaves inspired by a bunch of stained glass pieces that I saw.
Ventura Highway in the sunshine, where the days are longer, the nights are stronger than moonshine.
There's a ton of different methods to color the stained glass. I thought it would look the best and I wanted to try doing it with lighting gels from previous projects. Used that paper that I had drawn as a template to know what shape I needed to cut out. For any super small or thin pieces, kind of like the flower stems, just colored them on with permanent marker. A really easy option. It just gets a little bit streaky when it's a big area. Attach them onto the door frames. To create the outside border of the windows, I painted all around the edge, made that top long window above the doors a more simple stained glass window as well, with an old shower loofah. Turns out it's just one giant long tube. Cut a piece of that, stretched it out, painted that black, and laid it onto the window, coloring in random diamond pieces with permanent markers, and stippled on some Mod Podge to give that sort of textured stained glass look. And I think that this honestly really made a pretty big difference. The bottom area is where the koi pond will be, and I'm going to be using resin for that. So I needed to seal everything super well at the bottom to make sure that the resin didn't leak in places. Then I started layering on some terrain, which will be under the water. Rocks, trying to paint on some moss while also gluing on different pieces. I glued in the floor and the deck supports underneath it. I need to have everything line up correctly for both of the tracks and push it in at the same time. The benefit of using the wood is that it's not flexible, but the drawback is also that it's not flexible. I'm a little impressed that I got it to fit in there. And they can still open, because that was not easy. I am including some lights. Created a hole in the back of the tin to thread the light strand through so that the battery pack could stay on the back of the tin and have the switch easily accessible. I made the roof super similarly to the one in the Spirited Away project, just with some added stick width variation. So essentially I just lay all the sticks down, lay cardstock over it, trim off the edges to make the roof the right shape to fit in the tin, painted it a really dark red, and of course painting on highlights and shadows on the high areas and low areas of the roof. As with everything else, painting on and putting actual moss pieces on. I painted the inner sides of the tin fall leafy colors. I also made an upper roof piece that you won't see at all. Like the Spirited Away one, we are going to paint a night sky. Am I making that video again? This night sky is going to be a slightly different color. Oh no. Is this telling me not to do the sky? Is this a sign? If it was, I did not heed the warning. I've painted night skies in too many of my videos and they all look exactly the same, so here it is. After the sky was painted, I could stick the roof in. Yeah, that's about as well as I thought it was gonna go. Another really important element of this project was the tree pieces of sticks to glue into sort of the shape while also fitting it into the tin. For the leaves, we had a whole bunch of fall flowers grow in our garden right over by where Mango used to sit. Using those as leaves on the tree, it doesn't exactly look realistic, but we can add a little Ghibli fantasy. All of the little petals that I pressed ended up looking so much like tiny phoenix feathers. I went in and added moss, put some tiny leaves on some of them, just starting to work in some of these details. Then it was time to start making all of the props. That also means that it was clay time. I wanted to make a bunch of statue sort of things that I could intersperse throughout the project with different little faces, all super inspired by Spirited Away and a bunch of the other movies. Sculpted them out of Sculpey and did my absolute best at that scale and with my somewhat regrettable sculpting skills. I also made the mask for the seasonal spirit, like everything in this project, inspired by Spirited Away. It's a little bit similar for sure to No Face. Went ahead and made the koi fish, probably the most difficult thing that I had to sculpt because it had a lot of really small thin pieces for the fins and they needed a decent amount of texturing, cutting out the tail, adding on the eyes and like the little mouthpiece. I also made little gecko. He always really liked chasing them. The most important piece of this entire project is making my little mango cat. Now this was not easy. I did have some practice recreating him recently in that I painted a portrait of him for my mom for Christmas, but honestly, I don't feel like it helped me that much. Yeah, it was just really hard to sculpt him at this scale and to get the likeness right, which I did not. So we're just doing our best as always. Making the tail and all the little ears, and one of the hardest parts definitely shaping the face, which I didn't quite get right, but after that I had to paint all of them. So the statues, of course, I'm just painting to look like stone and adding some moss with some green paint and also laying on really tiny pieces of moss. I painted the mask. I also used a bunch of those dried flower petals to bring more of the seasonal fall theme into it. Kind of reminded me a little bit of a lion's mane, which he kind of had. Painted the koi fish. I did use some pearl paint to give it just a little bit of sort of a metallic shine for the scales. And then I also painted on details in orange and black. Then I painted my little mango figure with different shades of orange, putting the white around his nose area. It doesn't look like my cat, but it looks like a cat, so. I do want to add some fur. I feel like this is gonna be really weird to a lot of people. This is my other cat's fur. My other cat is a very similar color. Cat fur is a very plentiful resource in my house. No pets were harmed in the making of this. In fact, they were extra loved. So if you think that is weird, look away, look away. And then the final thing that I had to do was create the whiskers, which I used white thread for. One of the things that I really wanted to add were the Japanese wind chimes. They have like a glass dome at the top with a metal piece that hangs down and makes the bell sound as it hits against the glass. So to make those, I'm using transparent beads as the glass top, and the bottom pieces that hang down are just going to be made out of cardstock, and everything will be hanging by a piece of thread. The bottom pieces that hang down usually have designs on them, so I went ahead and painted them on some cardstock. One of them was a purple flower theme, and the other one, you all knew there would be a moon, let's be honest. Of course, we want to add as many plants as possible to our garden. The acorns are back from the Arietti project. I love using these acorns for stuff. I don't know why, but it just makes me so happy. Painted the outsides of them. Don't mind me just changing my mind about the color about 400 times. To make the ropes for the hanging ones, I'm using yarn separated into 4 strands to go around the pot part. At the top, I also threaded a tiny little seed bead onto it that ties all of the separated strands together in one spot. Then of course we had to fill our little acorn pots with moss and cut flower petals. The yellow sunflowers that I pressed at the beginning of the video are actually ones that my friend sent me when we lost him, so I had to press some of them to include because they just meant so much to me. If you're wondering why I'm wearing these, I'm just taking after YB.
I'd wear gloves next time.
I also added a birdhouse. It's all made of cardstock, relatively simple construction, just cutting out the shapes and gluing them all together. And painted that and also added a thread so that I could hang it. Then I had to start working on the Resin Koi Pond. To prepare for pouring the resin, I needed to make some holders that would hold the entire project in place and level. I also had to glue the koi fish onto the 2 support pieces so that they would stick in the area. This is my first time using resin, so I'm not exactly an expert. However, resin is a chemical. Make sure that you're taking after Nausicaa. You want to have a respirator. Do it in a well-ventilated space that is not your living area. Wear gloves, safety glasses, and fully cover your arms. This stuff is just as toxic as the forest. Please watch some videos on safety. Now that I've said all that, I am using just 1 glove in this video, only using that hand to touch near it. However, don't do that. Every project that I use resin in the future, I will have both gloves. The surface of the resin that touches whatever your mold is will mimic the surface of whatever that material that you use is. If you want it to be shiny, you have to use a shiny material or polish it. There are so many different kinds of resin, and the one that I'm using, I had to do 3 pours to get the depth that I wanted. In one of Real Terrain Hobbies videos, he mixed the color into 1 part first and stored that for each pour so that it's consistent throughout when you mix the hardener in. To color mine, I am also using a method that I saw from Bentley House Minis to create essentially what is an alcohol ink. I was a little bit heavy-handed with the color. It was my first time. One of the most important things when using resin is to mix everything super well. I'm scared, but here we go. This was a relatively tiny space to be pouring resin into. I poured it extremely messily because that was very difficult, but the good news, I literally mixed exactly the amount. And I don't know how that happened. And then it was time to demold. And we'll see if everything falls apart. I was not expecting it to go this well, to be honest with you. I did make it a little bit too dark. The final thing that I needed to do before assembly was the outside of the tin. Sort of a combination of the two past tin projects that I've done. So I did a collage in the background, and then I painted scenes over that as well. So I divided the outside into 4 sections, trying to transition the colors and just blend all the seasons. And of course, I had to add mango on to all of them. After all of that was done, it's time for final assembly. So here is Mango's dessert shop, inspired by Studio Ghibli. This was an unbelievably long project for me, and to be honest, it was not the easiest for me to work on sometimes. I miss him so much. Definitely the most special project to me that I've done. It just feels like I have a little piece of him. I love him so, so much, and I just hope that I've honored him with this. And to everyone out there with pets, give them just a little bit of love from me today. I would love to see other people design their own Ghibli films. Let me know if you would watch my Mango's Dessert Shop Ghibli film.